how do you advance a show? What is a show advance? So you've booked a show and now you have to go over hospitality, production, settlement, all this information, right? And how do you properly advance a show? And when should you start the show advance process? So this is a quick crash course on how to properly advance a show. So congratulations, you have a show coming up, right? Either you booked it or you're the artist and you've been booked, you work for an artist and you've been booked. And what does that whole process look like? How do you stand out and look professional when advancing a show? So what we're going to do today, we're going to go over a show advance template. It's a template I've used literally for club shows to arenas, amphitheaters, music festivals, right? Pretty simple template. There's many different ways to advance a show. Maybe there's some things the template misses. This is kind of a standard template to cover your bases for any club, to theater, to amphitheater, to most arenas, and so on, right? So let's go over what that was. Before we get into the sheet, when should you start the process? So depending how big the show is, if it's a club show, start at least 2 weeks out, right? So 2 weeks before your show date start. Don't start any show unless it's a festival, but like let's stick to the theaters and smaller. Don't start further than 4 weeks out, right? Because people are busy, clubs and venues are busy, things are always changing. So the furthest I would start is 4 weeks out. The bare minimum is 2 weeks out. Do not advance a show the week of or a week before, right? So give yourself at least a 2 to 4 weeks. Ideally, start the process in 4 weeks. If you have a very simple show, it's a comedian, it's a solo act, and sure, maybe you can do it a week or two out. But for most shows, let's create a standard, right? We're 4 weeks out. You want to start the advanced process. And by the process, maybe the initial contact, sending out a writer, sending out hospitality information, or if you're on the venue promoter side, reach out and ask for the writer. Or if you have a writer from an agent, ask if it's the most current writer, because we know that agencies do not have always the most current writers. Sometimes they have writers that are years old and not very relevant at all to a tour. So all different types of scenarios, right? So let's go through the process and look at what a show advance looks like. All right, so here's my advance template. So this is kind of a sheet I put together. I send it out for every show, right? If I have, the way I would start as a promoter venue, I would reach out to a tour and say, hey, is this the most current advance? Do you have a typical spiel that you send out, right? Some tour managers, production managers will have some kind of template email they send out to everyone. And if they say, yep, this is the most current one, here's my information, or they'll say, yeah, I'll get back to you in a couple of days or a week, but this writer is current. And what I would start doing is I'll go through the writer and just start filling in all of this information, right? So let's go through this information. So at the top, I put the show name, the venue, the city, and the date of the show, right? Those are all important things, especially if you're doing multiple shows with the same act. It's important to have all of those right there. Some of the questions I ask right off the top, not really important when you ask those or if those are your first questions, but I like knowing what time do you plan to load in and then how many people are traveling with the tour, right? Those are two questions I'm kind of really always curious about. And then, so let's go through this. So we have tour information and promoter, event organizer, venue, staff information, right? So from tour information, you want to have the contacts to production manager, tour manager, merch contact, VIP, and meet and greet contact. Those are the main contacts that you're going to need for every tour. Now, the smaller it is, the smaller that touring crew is going to be, right? So if it's a small tour, they might only have a tour manager handling most of these things. If it's a bigger tour, theaters, amphitheaters, sometimes bigger clubs, you will have a person for each of these roles and maybe even multiple other roles, right? But these are the main roles as a promoter rep, a venue rep that's advancing a show. That those are the contacts you're going to need, right? And then I guess real quick, so as we go into the promoter event organizer side, right? Who on the promoter side or venue side should be advancing a show? So when I worked for the big promoters, they always wanted the production manager to touch the show, right? Even if there's somebody at the venue advancing it, they always wanted the production manager involved. And the reason that was, one, you might be doing multiple shows with an artist, so you're going to know all the information and can make the whole process of advancing much, much easier and more convenient for an artist, right? Other reason is sometimes a venue will have multiple different departments. As you see, there's just multiple different roles, right? And each department wants to talk to someone. And maybe depending on how many roles the tour has, if they only have a tour and production manager, now the tour manager, production manager now have to talk to multiple different people. They're probably doing 20, 30, 40, 50 shows, right? So to make it easier for them, as the promoter rep, or the promoter or the venue rep, you should just basically know just enough for all these different departments to where you can do that process for them, and they only need to talk to one person directly, right? Some tours prefer that. Some tours like it, like talking to multiple people. But if you're really, really good at advancing, then you can be the only point of contact. And then you're just basically a middle person as a promoter rep between the venue and the tour. Or if there's somebody on the venue side that's really good at advancing, they can knock most of the stuff out, right? But the contacts you want on the promoter venue side is who is the promoter rep, or settlement rep, right? So if it's a promoter rep, they're going to settle. If the venue is doing it directly, then you just want a settlement rep for the venue. Then who's the production manager? If it's a theater, it might be tech director. Who's your front of house engineer? Who's your runner? Who's your catering company? If you have to hire a catering company, who handles your merch and who handles your VIP? So these are all the contacts you want to provide to the tour. Next is the shipping address. Why do you need a shipping address? The shipping address is not always the same as the venue address, right? If a tour may need to ship merch, because as they're on tour, they might be running out of things and they need more merch shipped to the venue. Or an artist is on tour for 3, 4, 5, 6, right, months or plus, and they're humans too, right? They need stuff. They might want to order things from Amazon or from online, wherever online. So they need things sent to the venue. So where should those things be shipped, right? Where can they ship things to the venue, right? So if it's a small club, it might be tougher, but if it's a big theater or getting bigger venues, they usually have a space where they can hold the artist stuff. So what's the shipping address? Where do they send merch and where do they have their online orders delivered to? Then you have a show schedule, right? So the first thing on your show schedule, and I guess one thing I could add in here is the walk and chalk. So we'll talk about what that is in a second. But the first thing is, what time is your load-in, right? But let's say you have an 8 a.m. load-in, and it's a tour that's doing a lot of rigging. What you might have before your load-in is what's called a walk and chalk, right? So maybe 30 minutes before load-in, the head rigger, the production manager from the tour, then maybe the head rigger on the promoter venue side, and then a tech director or production manager on the promoter venue side will basically walk the stage and the venue, or the front of the venue, wherever things are being rigged, right? They're basically just marking points. If it's an arena, they're obviously marking the whole floor, walking the whole floor of the arena and marking points where things are going to be rigged. So that way, when load-in happens, it's much, much easier to figure out where do the cases for the motors go, right? The motors for the rigging. Again, these are bigger shows, right? So if you're in a club, you wouldn't have a walk and chalk, but at a theater, amphitheater, arena, stadium, you're definitely going to have a walk and chalk, right? Then is your load-in time. So what time is the headliner loading in? And it's all their gear coming in. What is the sound check time and rehearsal? Is there a security meeting? You should always have a security meeting. It was quick, 5 minutes. That's fine. Have a security meeting always before doors, right? What time's doors? What time is the show and event start? That could be the first act, right? And then if you have multiple artists, this could be artist one. If it's a Broadway show, it's act one, or it's any kind of theater show where it's the same artist, right? But if you have multiple artists, it's like artist one, artist two, artist three, right? And basically what I would do here is, so let's say my walk and chalk is at 7:30 a.m. and then my load in is at 8 a.m. Right? So as you see here, I kind of just start filling in the schedule. Let's say my sound check is at 2 p.m. My security meeting is at 6:30 p.m. Then doors are at 7 p.m., right? Show starts at 8 p.m. and so on. Right? So basically just filling in the schedule. And then you're going to have an end time and then a loadout time. What I started doing as well is I confirm times. So I look at the contract and I say, okay, the contract says show starts at 7:30 p.m. But my venue website and my tickets say 8 p.m. So you're probably going to have some upset and disgruntled people because you have a discrepancy. Some people want to go by contract, but guess what? You're always going to go by what your venue and tickets say, right? So you may just have this uncomfortable situation with someone. It might be nothing at all, or it might be something where now an agent gets involved and things like that, which will be terrible if that happens. But you always just have to go by venue and ticket website, right? Because every single tickets that's sold is a contract, right? So if you sold 1,000 tickets, you have now violated 1,000 contracts for your 1,000 customers that bought tickets, because the tickets as the show starts at 8 o'clock. And usually tickets are non-exchangeable, non-refundable, and so on. The second you change the show times or anything about the show, now you open yourself up for refunds, right? So now everyone can say, well, now that the show starts at a different time, now I can't go. Now it gives them an excuse to get a refund, right? So always go by ticket and venue website, and whoever is upset about it, they'll just have to deal with it. Settlement, I always ask, is a company check night of show okay? These are some kind of standard terms I've used in the past. So if you require cash at settlement, we will need to order cash 5 to 10 business days before a show. Just if you're the promoter and you can provide cash, just figure out what your policies are as far as providing cash night of show. If you're dealing with a venue and the venue's providing cash, figure out what those policies are, right? And some venues can't provide cash, right? So always figure out what your capabilities are. So try to always ask for, so usually I would even ask, do you want a company check night of show or next day wire, right? You must wire you the settlement the next day. Then I just have a quick note. Was a deposit paid? How much was paid? Then we have some production details. This is pretty much the same, right? So we have audio, video, lighting. So who is providing what? What is the venue or promoter providing? And what is the artist providing, right? And then in these notes right here, I would just either put venue provided based on venue tech pack, or as per venue provided as per venue tech pack. Or I might put promoter is renting sound and lights, right? And an artist is, if an artist is carrying, I will probably put artist provided as per production writer, right? So I don't put a lot of details in there. I just try to keep it simple. But if there's anything being rented, I put that in here, and it just kind of who's providing. Is it by the venue tech pack, or does anything need to be supplemented, right? So if we have maybe the venue sound, but we need to rent extra subwoofers or whatever it is, I might add that in here in audio as well. So if what is being provided is it already in-house? Is there any being supplemented, or is the artist bringing everything, right? And there may be any other notes that are relevant to audio. Same thing with lighting, same thing with video. Then power, right? So how much power is available? I might say 200 amps stage right, then maybe 400 amps stage left. I'm just making things up. So SR, right, stage right. And if you really want to be specific, you can do upstage right, upstage left, right? And then definitely learn your stage directions, right? What is upstage, what's downstage, what's stage right, stage left, so on. That's important to learn, is learn your stage directions. So how much power is available, or this might be, I need to rent power, right? Need to rent 2 generators if you're doing an outdoor event. And ideally you're renting 2 generators every time, which is, I know, a pain in the ass, but a lot of times you don't want audio on the same power source as video and lighting, right? Video and lighting can be on the same, but you always want audio on a different power source. So that's really important to remember as well. Risers. Do you need risers, right? Do you need risers for a drum kit, keyboards for a DJ? Can they be stationary risers, or do you need risers, or do you need rolling risers, right? They have to be on wheels so you can wheel them off stage or to the side of stage. So that's important note. Rigging, is there any rigging? How many points? Can your venue handle the weight? That's an important one, right? So how many points are you rigging, and how much weight are you rigging? And then just make sure your venue is capable of handling that weight. If it's not, then you have to probably either alter the production and have a different type of production, or do some rentals, right? Rent some gear that can basically ground support a video wall. For example, I had to do that before for a show where we had to ground support a video wall. Not very fun to have to do that. Then do you need to provide backline? Is there any other backline or any other rentals? And basically, is your talent traveling with instruments or not, right? So what are they traveling with? Then vehicles, I always want to know, how many vehicles am I dealing with? How many buses, how many trucks, how many cars, how many vans or trailers, right? And then I want to know what time they're arriving and what time they plan on departing. And the reason that's important is if I have a show that ends today and they don't plan on leaving my loading docks until 4 a.m., that means the show the next day cannot arrive until, I usually try to put an hour buffer, right? It means they can't arrive until 5 a.m. because my loading docks are busy, right? So if I know my show the night before is departing at 4, I can't arrive until 5 a.m. And then I figure, okay, when do you want to depart? They want to depart at 2 a.m. Usually tours, as soon as they're packed up, they leave, unless they have like a night off the next day. And then there might be some some wiggle room. I might have to talk to the tour the day before or the tour the next day to figure out how you can make it work for everyone. Then I add in loading directions, parking directions. I usually have a production budget for rentals, right? So if it is rentals, what is my budget? Whenever you're advancing something that's not in your contract or your writer and it's out of budget, you always have to figure, okay, who's paying for this? How are we paying for this? That's always a question you have to ask. Like, what is the who's paying for it? And where's the show expense, right? Crew. So what is the artist crew? Might be one TM. You might have one production manager. You might have a merch person. You might have a guitar tech. You might have a drum tech. You might have 2 audio people. You might have 1 LD. This is like a big tour right here, right? You have a VIP person. You have a road manager who can be the assistant to the tour manager or production manager. This could also be a production assistant, right? So you could have like multiple people that are on a touring crew. Then what is the local crew, right? So what are we providing locally? You're going to have 1 tech director or production manager. You're going to have, if you're dealing with unions, you're going to have a steward. Let's say you have 10 stagehands. You're going to have 1 electrician. You could have 2 audio people, 1 LD, 1 video, right? You're going to have 4 or 5 riggers, right? You can have flymen, right? So what are all the different positions you have to provide? And usually whatever you're providing for load in, you're also providing for load out. And again, these are big, this will be like a bigger tour, right? If you're just dealing with a club, it might just be, you literally just have an audio person and a lighting person, and that's fine, right? So you might just have audio and lighting, and that's it. If you're dealing with a slightly bigger club, you might have audio, lighting, video, and 4 stagehands, right? So this would definitely be already like a little bit of a bigger show. Then what is your show crew, right? So you have always going to have your production manager. You're going to have maybe a stage manager. You could have, you know, definitely have your 2 audios, right? So basically all this is right here, you're listing out who's working what, right? When, and just 2 stagehands, right? So basically, these are people that work in your show. That's your show call. You have a load-in call and a load-out call, right? And your show crew is usually only, I mean, they're usually working the entire day, right? So these are definitely people that are overlapping with your load-in and load-out crew. Now for load-in, load-out, you're going to have what's called a 4-hour minimum. So everyone that's working here, even if they only need 3 hours to do load-in or 3 hours to do load-out, they're going to get paid 4 hours no matter what, right? So now you need your local crew budget or local stagehand budget, and so that's going to come from your contract or offer, and then just make sure whatever you're scheduling can be covered by your budget, right? If you have to go over, but what you need to do is put together a stagehand estimate, right? So all of the crew collectively, they're just called a stagehand bill, right? Or you can call it the labor bill, production labor bill. But what you should do now based on what you advanced and all the crew you need, you should now have a stagehand estimate. And then you provide that estimate to the production manager or tour manager, whoever's asking for the labor call, right? This is what this is called, the labor call. Provide them an estimate and see if you're within budget. If you're out of budget, then figure out, okay, what do we do now, right? Who pays for the extra? And usually, most times, it's always on the promoter and venue. So that's where you need to look at your ticket sales, right? Is the show selling well? Okay, fine. Our stagehands are a little more expensive. It sucks, but it is what it is. Or the show's selling poorly. Now you try to see if you can push back on any of this without sacrificing the safety of the workers, right? But try to push back on whatever you can. So it's always an uncomfortable conversation to have when you're over budget and a show's not selling well. Hospitality. So always ask, right? So please send a hospitality writer, blah, blah, blah. We can always do pre-shop, right? And I always ask too, do you need everything on the writer? And a couple of reasons I would ask that. One, of course, you want to try to not spend money that you don't have to. And 2, food waste. Like, let's be better as an industry about wasting food, right? If we don't need it, then let's not waste it. It's so important. Meal time. So if it's a longer day, so let's say it's not a club show where you're probably just providing a $200 to $500 hospitality rider. Let's say it's a show with catering. What time's breakfast? What time's lunch? What time's dinner? how many people are you feeding for each meal? And can the local crew, right? So these people here that are working all day, they're going to need to be fed, right? So can you feed the local crew from your catering, or do they need to like walk away and leave? And then that, well, I guess I should do a different video on unions, but when it comes to unions, that's going to be a big difference, right? Because if they walk away, then they have to leave for an hour, and then you basically have what's called a dark stage, where nobody can go on stage. So a lot of tours try to avoid having a dark stage. If it's Broadway or something bigger, then sure, maybe they'll have a dark stage all the time to try to save some costs, right? Because when it's a dark stage, the crew leaves, they're off the clock, and you're not paying for the crew. And anyways, maybe I'll do a union thing. I'm trying to keep this simple, but that's meal times. Dressing rooms, I always list how many dressing rooms there are, right? So is there a separate production office? Is there separate green rooms, right? So if it's a club, the green room is the dressing room, right? If there's only one room. But if it's a bigger venue, you'll have separate dressing rooms from the green room, and the green room is usually where like catering is, right? It's usually a catering room. A lot of bigger venues have a separate production office where basically the tour manager, production assistants, road managers, right? They'll hang out in the production office. Sometimes there's multiple production offices, and then the promoter rep that's on tour with Live Nation, AEG, the big promoters, they'll have their own production office. You might have star dressing rooms. You have chorus rooms, right? There's all different types of dressing rooms. So I just list the dressing room types available here. Make sure if there's a discrepancy, if the writer asks for 3 dressing rooms and you only have 1, then you just say, I only have 1 dressing room, right? Just make sure they know that. Runner, right? Are you going to have a runner? Yes, all day at load-in, right? It's usually typical. So that's why I already have that written in here. You have a runner all day at load-in with personal vehicle or company car, right? Or you might have to rent an SUV. You might have to rent a 15-passenger. You might have to rent a blacked out SUV, right? So whatever you have to rent, make sure you have that information in here. Well, towel needs, how many towels do you need? And this is usually bath towels and stage towels, right? And the stage towels, no, they're not bar towels, right? If you're working on a club, or showing a club. So how many stage towels you need, how many bath towels you need, I will tell you, they need to always be pre-washed, right? So if you need to provide towels and you're a promoter and it's your first show, buy the towels a day or two before, wash them, and then use pre-washed towels. It's just something I've learned. It sounds petty, but an artist once complained that they don't want the fuzzies on their body from a new towel. That's why you need to be pre-washed, right? So just as a standard, always have pre-washed towels. I used to literally be on the road carrying bags and bags of towels as a promoter rep, because a venue may not have towels, or you're doing a show at a club, and clubs a lot of times don't have baths and stage towels, right? They have bar towels. So if you're a promoter rep doing a show at a club, then definitely provide those. Venue tech specs. So I just attached tech pack from the venue. Might be a fun video to go through a tech pack from a venue. So just make sure in the email I say that's attached. Merchandise, where is merch happening, right? So is it in the lobby, or is there a different area where the merch is happening? What does the venue or promoter need to provide? Tables, chairs, power, Wi-Fi, right? Just pretty standard. Who's providing the bank? Is the artist providing the bank? Is the venue providing the bank? Are credit cards being accepted for merch? Who's accepting credit cards? Is the venue accepting credit cards? The tour accepting credit cards, right? That's important. Who's the seller, right? So who's selling the merch? Is it artist or venue? And if it's the venue, then just have a contact whoever the person is that's selling the merch. Then here I have a split. What is the split, right? So 75-25 on soft goods, 90-10 on hard goods. I'll do another video on this in the future, what soft goods and hard goods are. But I guess just real quick, soft goods are t-shirts, hats, hoodies, posters, right? Hard goods, I usually say it's always copyright or copy hard or recorded goods. So it's the stuff that you copyright, right? It's your music, your DVDs, your books, things like that. Those are typically hard goods. Then I just list, is the split happening? So it is the percentage of merch happening after, before, it was usually after the deduction of sales tax, right? So it was in Florida, it's actually 6.5% sales tax. And then is there a seller fee, right? So $100 seller fee, or to be determined what a seller fee is. And then that's just my standard language I have in there, right? But $100, $150 is usually pretty standard if the venue is providing the seller. Then meet and greet. Where is the meet and greet happening, right? Where in the venue is the meet and greet? Where are they checking in for meet and greet? Usually at box office. What time does the meet and greet start? and what does it entail? Is it a quick photo? Is it an acoustic set? Is it a sound check party? Is it an ice cream party, pizza party? What is it, right? Do they get anything, right? So do the guests get anything for the meet and greet? So pretty straightforward here. Do you have any security parameters? Right, so this is some language I added in here. This is a non-smoking venue for smoking any kind, smoking of any kind, including vape. There's a $300 fine. Right, just know what your venue's rules are on smoking. Some venues will say you can't smoke cigarettes. Anything else, we don't care, right? Whatever the venue smoking rules are in the dressing rooms or in the venue period, just figure out what are the rules for the venue. Then in security also, are there any specific security requirements, right? Is there going to be a mosh pit? Do you need a security guard at a certain position? What time's the security meeting? Is there moshing? Is there crowd surfing? And anything else you may need to know about the audience, right? It's a heavily drinking audience. They do a lot of drugs, which means we usually have a lot of people pass out. So we should have some extra EMTs on the show. Things like that are all important to know in the security details. Credentials, who's carrying and providing the credentials, right? Is the tour providing the credentials and carrying those, or is the house providing credentials, or is the tour providing credentials for the tour, but the venue or the promoter has to provide credentials for their workers, right? Their local crew that are working all day. So who's providing credentials? A lot of the bigger tours, they'll have multiple different, big old thunderstorm. A lot of tours will have multiple, or provide all the credentials for everyone, right? To keep it kind of standardized. And they'll have like tour laminates that give you all access to everyone. That's usually the touring crew. And then they'll have working stickies, that gives you stickers that for the working crew. They'll have backstage passes for VIPs. They'll have meet and greet passes, right? Sometimes there's all different types of passes. So it's important to get a pass sheet. Sometimes you may not get that in advance because of security reasons, right? You don't pass sheets roam around on the internet. And also, so you might not get that day of show, right? Pass sheet. Just make sure you have to have that pass sheet posted wherever in the venue you need. And make sure you know, I mean, I guess it's not common sense in a way, but if anyone has a pass on your crew, whoever has the privilege to have a sticky or a laminate, make sure you're not posting pictures of it on social media. I've once had an issue with a tour where someone I work for catering was so excited to be working a show, and this person posted a picture on Instagram that they were working the show and posted a picture of their pass. You don't want those pictures out there because there's people that are going to create counterfeit passes, and now they're going to try to get backstage, putting people at risk, right? The safety of the show is now at risk when someone that's not supposed to be backstage is getting backstage. And depending what kind of venue it is, they may not even be getting checked, right? They may not be getting checked for weapons or anything. So just be careful, right? Don't post passes. Like keep that stuff as memorabilia, and it's fun to have, but don't post that stuff. It's not cool. But that's basically your basic show advance. So it covers most of the things on a pretty basic level. If anyone has any questions, feel free to leave a comment on the video. If you're one of my students, of course, send me a message. We'll discuss this in class as well. And yeah, that's just any question. Yep. Let me know if you have any questions, if you need to clarify anything, and I'm happy to answer all of those. So until next time, spread love, positivity, and kindness in the world, and live the life you love. Peace, my friends.
Live the life you love.